I'm making this video for an entry of the HMI software challenge number 1. I will be using AdvancedHMI as my software of choice. To use AdvancedHMI, it requires two software packages, the first being Visual Studio and the other being the AdvancedHMI software. So for this demo, I will be using Visual Studio Express 2012 for Windows Desktop. And the reason I chose this software is because it is the lightest weight version that meets all the requirements for use with AdvancedHMI. And it's also a free version of Visual Studio. And the version of AdvancedHMI I'm using is also the base package, which is free. So everything you see in this video being done is done with freely available software. So now, as we're waiting on this install, this may not be the best benchmark counting install time on a time basis, because installation time is going to vary drastically from PC to PC depending on the speed of the PC, the hard drive, so forth, and the prerequisites. But I'm installing this on a Windows 10 with all the Windows updates. Now you see now that I'm complete, I'm going to launch Visual Studio, and the first thing I'm going to do in Visual Studio is open a project. I'm going to browse to the folder where I extracted my AdvancedHMI project and open the Visual Studio solution file. And once that's opened, the first thing I'm going to do is come to Solution Explorer, expand down the AdvancedHMI project, and double click Main Form. And now you see we've got some steps here to help get us started. And the first step is to build the solution. And once that's complete, we can go up to our toolbox and our driver list and add a driver. Now I'm going to be using a compact Logix that's on my office network. So I'm going to take the Ethernet IP for CLX.com driver, and my IP address is 192.168.110. Now while I'm here, I'm also going to change my poll rate override, which is basically the communication refresh. I'm setting to 100. Okay, so now we're set up with that. Item number 1 is to display a value that changes color based on its value. I'm going to use, in my toolbox, an analog value display for that. Add that to the form. Let me come into my toolbox and increase the size of the font. And now I will go down to PLC address value, and I'm going to put in timertag.acc, because that is a tag in my compact Logix, and that is a timer that goes up to 3 seconds, so it's 0 to 3000, resets and starts over. So what I'm going to do to change colors, I'm going to put my lower limit at 1000, my upper limit at 2000, and you see these correspond with 3 colors up here: my in limits, over limit, and under limit. And that pretty much takes care of that item number 1. So now item number 2 is to make a text appear when going above or below the limits, basically indicating an alarm. I can actually use my exact same control for this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste that control and change a few properties. So what I want to do is I'm going to go to value prefix, and I'm going to put low alarm. Now you see what it does, it tells me low alarm and shows me the value from the PLC. Now I don't want to show that value, I just want to show the low alarm. So if I go up to my property, show value, I'm going to set that to false. And you see now it just shows my prefix and not the actual value. Now to make this disappear and reappear when it's in the alarm condition, if I go down here to my visible control, it's on always. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set that to below limits. So if it goes below value limit lower, then it will become visible. So the high alarm, copy and paste, do the exact same thing. Change the name to high alarm, but this time my visible control will be above limits. Okay, that completes item number 2. Item number 3 is a trend chart of one value. Now in AdvancedHMI, the trend chart is referred to as the chart by sampling. So in my toolbox, let me grab a chart by sampling, put it on my form, and then over my properties, PLC address items, select that, open this, add an item, and I'm going to put timertag.acc, and that will make it chart that tag. Now it is a bar chart by default, so I'm going to go into my series and change this to a fast line. At the same time, I'm going to go up here and change the border width, which is actually the line thickness, to 3. And so that takes care of my trend chart. So now item number 4 is to send a text message. The way I do a text message in Advanced HMI is through an emailer. In my toolbox, I'm going to take my emailer, add it to the form. Now the trick to this is every cellular provider has a phone number or a email address you can send a phone number and email address to, and it will be transmitted as a text message. So let's say, for example, in my emailer, my message to, I would put, let's say, area code 111-555-1212 at txt.att.net. That would be the AT&T code for sending to this phone number a text message. So now what I'm going to do is I've got server presets. So let's say I'm using Gmail. I pick my Gmail and it populates some of my fields for me automatically. So now what I would have to do is put in my email at gmail.com, and then the password for it, I'll just say my password. I'm going to populate this with all fictitious stuff, just basically to demonstrate how to do it, but not actually send a text message. Now my PLC address value, I'm going to put in timertag.acc, and the trigger type, I'm going to say when I go above the target value, and I'm going to put in a target value of 2000. So when my timer tag goes above 2000, it will fire off the text message. And that pretty much completes that. Now what I'm going to do, since I've got fictitious stuff in here, I'm going to take out the PLC address value just so it doesn't keep trying to attempt to send emails. Okay, so now the last item, now this one's actually the most involved in Advanced HMI, and it's database work. So the idea is to log every 1 second a value to a database. Now if we remember on my driver, I told it to update every 100 milliseconds, 10 times a second. So to do 1 second, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to copy and paste that driver. So I have a new instance, and I'm going to now set this driver to update every 1 second with everything else the same. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a data subscriber, and I'm going to link that to that second driver, and I'm going to tell it to look at timertag.acc. So now that has my setup connecting to the PLC and receiving a value every 1 second. So now to connect to the database, I'm going to come over here to my data source tab, and I have to add me a new data source. It's a data set, a database, a data set, and create a new connection. Now in my office, I literally have a office server is the name of the database server. Let me put in a username and password for it, and now when I come to drop down my select database, I have a test DB in there, and that's takes care of that. And now when I click next, I have the option to indicate which tables I will be using for this application. Now once that's done, I'm going to scroll down and say I have a data samples table. Now the only field I'm interested in is the value field. The others are automatically populated once data is put into the database. So let me finish that. So that creates basically the tools I need to connect to the database. So now what I've got to do is the hard part is I actually have to write some code to transfer the information that comes from through the data subscriber, send it to the database. Now with my data subscriber selected, I'm going to come back to my properties, select my lightning bolt, and this tells me my events. I have 2 events I'm interested in: data changed or data returned. Data change is pretty self-explanatory. Data return will fire the event every time data comes back from the PLC. And if we remember, have this connected to a driver updating once every second. So every second I'm going to have data come to this event. So let me use this event. If I double click, it brings me back to some code. So this is where I've actually got to transfer my value I received into the database. Now this is done using ADO.NET, which is, it's nothing special to Advanced HMI. You can actually use ADO.NET in any .NET application. There's just thousands of examples on the internet of how to use it. So I'm going to type out some code here real quick and try to talk through it a little bit. But what ADO.NET is a disconnected database tool. So essentially what I'm going to have to do here is I'm going to create me a database in memory, populate the data, and then transfer it to the database using what is known as a data table adapter. So see my lines of code, basically I created my table, I'm adding a new row to the table, and now I can address that row. Since I only have one row in this table that's in memory, if I use row 0 and my field is shown right here's value, now this is where I need to show the value that come from the PLC. And my data subscriber event, that comes back as an array. Since I only have one value, it's e.value0. So now essentially I've populated my in-memory data table with one row that has the data that I need. So now what I've got to do is create a table adapter. Oh, let me get it right here. You see, I'll pick my table adapters and my data samples table adapter. And now to use the table adapter, I'm going to do TA update, and I'm going to pass it my table that is now in memory. And that will actually transfer any changes, additions, deletions that I have in memory, sync it up with the database. And that's pretty much it. I mean, it's not the easiest thing in the world, but there again, you see it's not terribly difficult. So now that completes, I believe, everything on the list, all 5 items. So now let's give it the test and start the application up. And let me pull it in the view here and let's actually see what's happening. So we see my values changing color. I'm below 1000, yellow, white, and then red when I'm above it. And you see my high alarm and low alarm labels are displaying accordingly. My trend chart, you can see my timer going up and down. So now the last thing to see, I'm going to bring my database management studio in here, and let's actually look at the table. And you see I am receiving data into the table every 1 second. If you kind of look at the values, you can kind of see they're within a few milliseconds of each other. Every 1 second. So that's it. That pretty much completes all 5 items of the challenge.